They brought her to my gate the way men leave an offering they never expect to collect quickly, without meeting my eyes, and with the door already swinging shut behind them before her feet had found the ice. I watched from the high window of the Ashen Hall, where I watched everything now, and I saw the sled turn and run before she had straightened from the cold. 2 riders from Larkfin, wrapped to the eyes, whipping their horses back toward the pass as though the frost that lived in my walls might reach down the road and take them too. They were not wrong to fear it. The frost had taken better men than them, and it had never once asked their leave. The woman they left did not run after the sled. That was the first thing I marked about her, and I marked it because no one else had ever failed to. Every healer, every hedge witch, every bold fool sent to break my curse had done the same thing in their first hour, turned to look back at the road home, some part of them already gone down it. She did not turn. She set down a satchel that was too small to carry hope in, folded her hands, and looked up at the black face of my hall as if it were a patient she had been asked to see. The cold was already rising. I felt it the way I had felt it every dusk for 11 years, a slow closing behind my ribs, a hand of ice reaching up through my own blood until my breath frosted in a hall where I had once kept 40 hearths burning. My wolf, what was left of him, drew in on himself and shivered. That was the curse, not a beast that raged, a cold that grieved, and when it rose fully near midnight, no living thing that stood inside these walls could stand it. I should have sent her away before the dark. I had sent all the others away. I would open the gate and let the cold breathe out at them, and they would understand, and they would go, and I would be alone again, which was the only mercy I had left to give anyone. I went down the frozen stair to do it. I had learned to walk quietly through my own house so as not to wake the frost early. I came into the low hall where they had left her, and she was standing in the middle of the stone floor with her breath smoking white, and she was not shaking. "You should go," I said. My voice had gone rough with disuse. I spoke to no one for weeks at a time. "Whatever they promised you, whatever they threatened, it is not worth this. The cold comes at midnight. It has killed men in their armor. Go now, while the road is still open." She looked at me. I had not been looked at truly in a long time. The healers who came sent their eyes skating off me, off the gray that had come into my hair too young, off the frost that rimed my sleeves, off the thing they could feel gathering in the corners of the room. This one looked at my face as though my face were the point. "They didn't promise me anything," she said, "and they can't threaten a person who's already been given away." She said it plainly, without pity for herself, the way you'd report weather. "My name is Tamsin. I'm in what I can. Larkfin decided it could spare me, so here I am, a small breath. You're colder than they said. That's not a fever. Fever burns. You're the other thing." No one had ever said it so simply. Cursed, the other thing. I stood there in my own frozen hall and felt absurdly seen. "Larkfin spared you," I said. "You mean they sent the one they wouldn't miss?" "Yes," she agreed, unoffended. "I've no husband, no pack standing, no father living to raise a fuss. I set bones and I brew for the fever and I sit with the dying so they don't die alone, and none of that earns a place at the high table. So when your steward's letter came begging for a healer and every proud one in 3 holds had already run from you, they looked round the room for who they could lose." She almost smiled. "It's not the worst thing to be, you know, the one who can be lost. You get sent to the places that matter." I did not know what to do with her. I had a lifetime of practice at frightening people out of my house, and none at all at this. "The cold will not care that you are brave," I said, and I heard the roughness crack in my own voice. It did not care that my brother was brave. It did not care that my father was strong. "Tamsin of Larkfin, I am telling you the truth as a kindness. If you are inside these walls at midnight, you may not see the dawn. Go." For the first time something moved behind her steadiness. Not fear. She stepped toward me instead of away, which was wrong, which no one did, and she reached up and before I could flinch back, laid the flat of her hand against the side of my jaw the way you'd test a child for fever. I had not been touched in 11 years. Her hand was warm. That is a small thing to say, and it is the largest thing that had happened to me in a decade. Her hand was warm, and where it lay against my jaw the frost did not creep. The cold that lived in me, the cold that fed on everything it could reach, met the small living heat of her palm and did not take it. Banked. Behind my ribs the closing hand of ice eased by the width of a breath, and I stood very still, the way you stand when a wild thing has come close and you do not want to end it. Her eyes had gone wide, she felt it too. "You're warm here," she said, wondering, her fingers still on my jaw. "Under the cold. There's a man in here who's still warm," she swallowed. "How long have you been alone in this?" 11 years, I said. I had not counted them aloud before. Since I was 23. 11 years, she repeated, and something in her face folded, and it was not fear and it was not pity. It was a kind of grief on my behalf that I had no defense against at all. She took her hand away. I felt the cold rush back into the place where it had been like water closing over a stone, and she picked up her too small satchel. "Show me where you sit at night," she said. "I'm staying." I want to tell you that I refused her. I want to tell you I threw the bolt and put her on the road and saved her the way I had saved all the others by frightening them home. But her hand had been warm against my jaw, and for the length of that touch the cold in me had stopped. For the first time in 11 years it had stopped, and I was 23 again and starving, and I could not make my mouth form the word go. "This way," I said instead, and I hated myself for it, and I led her up into the dark of my house to wait for the thing that would try to kill her. I had not always been the cold king. Dunkero had not always been a hall men crossed themselves to name. I was born the second son of a good alpha, in a hold where the hearths burned high, and the pack ran the northern snows for the joy of it, and I would have lived a small, warm life in my brother's shadow and counted myself lucky. But my brother died in a border raid the winter I turned 23, and my father followed him inside a season, his heart broken past mending, and the whole weight of Dunkero came down on a young man who had never once been raised to carry it. And into that grief, that green and fumbling grief, came a woman who called herself a guest and was something older and worse. She had wanted Dunkero's pass for her own reasons, a road, a toll, a war I never fully understood, and she had thought a boy alpha drowning in mourning would be an easy gate to walk through. When I would not open it, when I stood in my father's place and told her no, she smiled at me the way the frost smiles, and she laid her hand where I could not stop her, over my heart, and she said, "Then be as cold as your no, Wolf. Let no fire warm you and no soul stay by you, and grieve alone as long as your line lasts." And she was gone before dawn, and by the next dusk the first hearth had guttered, and by midnight the cold had come up out of my own blood for the first time, and killed the 2 guards who tried to hold me while I screamed. I learned the shape of it after that. I learned that it woke at dusk and rose to its full killing height near midnight and thinned again by dawn. I learned it could not be fought or burned or prayed away, that fire died in its presence and living things fled it, that the only creature it could not reach was me, its host, whom it kept alive to grieve. And I learned, slow and bitter, the one lesson that made me the cold king in truth, that the surest way to keep it from killing was to keep everyone away from me. So I sent them away. The pack, the servants, the healers, the brave and the desperate and the bought. I sent them all down the road, and I stood in the emptying house, and I told myself that a man who lets no one near cannot be the death of anyone. It was the closest thing to virtue I had left, and I clung to it like a drowning man clings to the thing that is drowning him. 11 years, long enough for the frost to eat the paint from the walls and the warmth from my hands, long enough that I had stopped believing there was a version of the story that ended anywhere but here, alone, cold, waiting each night to survive myself. And now there was a small, warm woman sitting in my dead hall, threading a needle by the last gray light, refusing to go. The cold came at midnight, and I watched what it did to her, and it undid everything I knew. We were in the solar, the one room I still kept, because it was where my father had died and I had not been able to leave it. I had built her a place by the cold hearth as far from my chair as the room allowed, 6 paces. I remember thinking, 6 paces might be enough distance to keep her alive an hour. It was not distance that saved her. I understand that now. But I did not understand it then, and so I sat in my chair and gripped its arms and felt the frost begin to climb. You have never felt cold like the cold that came up out of me. It is not weather. It is intent. It came off my skin in a gray breath and rolled across the floor like water finding its level, and the last coals in the dead hearth cracked and went black, and the window glass frosted from the inside, and my own breath stopped smoking because there was no warmth left in it to smoke. I felt my heart slow. I felt the room begin to die. And across 6 paces I saw Tamsin lift her head, and I braced myself for the part I had watched a dozen times. The gasp, the panic, the scramble for the door, the healer who was so sure until she wasn't. She did not run. She wrapped her shawl tighter, and she frowned as though the cold were a puzzle rather than a death. And then, I will never forget this, she got up out of her safe place by the dead hearth and she walked toward me. Into it. Into the worst of it. 6 paces, 5, 4, straight into the gray killing breath of my curse, and instead of dying she got warmer. I saw it. The frost that rolled across the floor met her feet and thinned. The gray breath that filled the room drew back from the space around her the way a tide draws off a stone. She walked into the heart of the thing that had killed guards in their armor, and it banked before her. It banked and banked. And by the time she reached my chair the air around us both was merely cold, the ordinary cold of a winter room, and she stood there with her cheeks pink and her breath smoking white, smoking, warm, and looked down at me with an expression I had no name for. "There," she said softly, "that's better, isn't it? You've been sitting in the worst of it on purpose, to keep it away from me across the room, haven't you?" She said it as a certainty, not a question. "You brave, foolish man. It doesn't want the room, it wants you. And it can't have the part of you that's near me." She knelt down by my chair, into the thawed circle her own body made, and she took both my frozen hands in both her warm ones, and 11 years of ice met the small living heat of her and stopped. I made a sound. I am not ashamed to tell you. A man who has not been warm in 11 years, who has not been touched, who has spent a decade certain he was the death of anyone who loved him. That man makes a sound when the cold behind his ribs eases all at once, when for the first time since he was a boy the thing that lives in his blood lies down. It came up out of me like a wound reopening, and Tamsin did not let go of my hands. She held them and she watched my face, and when the worst of it had passed through me she said, very quietly, "How long since anyone stayed?" "No one has ever stayed," I said. "The cold takes them by midnight." "The cold takes them," she agreed, "because they aren't me." And then she flushed as if she'd said more than she meant, and she looked down at our joined hands, hers warm, mine thawing, and neither of us said the word that was hanging in the frozen air between us, the word for what she was that the cold could not touch, the word my father had told me stories of when I was a pup and had stopped believing in when the frost came. Neither of us said it. But I felt the bond stir for the first time in 11 years. Not my wolf going still. My wolf had gone still a decade ago and never woke. I felt the cold itself go quiet, felt something enormous and buried turn over in me like the year turning at the darkest hour toward the light. And I knew, the way you know your own name, that this small overlooked healer that Larkfin had thrown away, because they wouldn't miss her, was the one thing in the whole frozen world that was mine. We stayed like that, her hands in mine, until the dark thinned toward dawn and the cold sank back down where it lived. And when the first gray light came into the frosted window she was still kneeling by my chair, asleep sitting up, her head fallen against my knee, warm, breathing, alive, the first living soul to see a dawn inside Dunkero's walls in 11 years. I did not move for a long time. I did not want to wake her. I sat in my thawed chair with a sleeping woman's head against my knee, and I looked at the light coming up on the frost-eaten walls of my dead house, and I found that my face was wet, and that the cold had not taken even that. She would not be sent home. I tried that first morning out of the last of my old habit of saving people by frightening them, and she looked at me over the pot she was scouring and said, "Doran." She had asked my name at breakfast and taken it like it was hers to use. The last man who tried to send me somewhere for my own good was my father, and he did it because it was easier than keeping me. I know the tune. I won't dance to it from you. And she went back to scouring, and that was the end of it. So she stayed, and the shape of my nights changed, and then the shape of my days. The nights first. Every dusk the cold still rose, the curse was not broken, only held, but now there was a place in the world where it could not reach, and that place moved through my dead house on 2 warm feet and would not leave my side. She learned the hours of it as fast as I had. She learned that if she was near me at midnight the killing frost banked to a bearable chill, that if she took my hands the ice behind my ribs lay down, that the warmth of her was a thing the curse simply could not eat. And knowing it, she used it without fear and without stinting. She sat with me through the worst hours the way she'd told me she sat with the dying, so I wouldn't be alone in it, except I was not dying. For the first time in 11 years, in her company, I was doing the opposite of dying, and I did not have a word for that either. The days changed because a house where someone stays becomes a house again. She lit the first fire Dunkero had held in a decade, a small one in the solar hearth, close enough to her that the cold couldn't smother it, and I stood in front of it like a man at a shrine because I had forgotten what firelight did to a room, how it moved, how it made the shadows kind. She found the frozen kitchens and thawed a corner of them and cooked, badly at first and then well, and the smell of bread came up the stairs of my dead house, and I had to go and stand at a window because it undid me. She opened shutters that had been frozen shut for years and let gray northern daylight into rooms that had forgotten it. She was not trying to break my curse. She was simply refusing to let me keep living as though I were already dead, and it turned out those 2 things were closer than I knew. And she talked to me. Gods, she talked to me. 11 years of silence, and then this steady stream of a woman who narrated her mending and argued with the bread and asked me the names of the frozen portraits and told me about Larkfin, about the mother she'd lost young and the father who'd found her easier to give away than to raise, about the years of being the one who could be spared. She said it all without self-pity, and I began to understand that she and I were the same wound turned 2 different ways, both of us people the world had decided it could do without, me by my own hand and her by others. The difference was that she had never let it make her cold. She had been given away her whole life, and she had answered it by giving herself freely to everyone the world also threw away, the dying, the fevered, the cursed. She had been made lonely and had chosen, against it, to be warm. I fell in love with her the way the thaw comes to the north, not all at once, but past any point of stopping. I fell in love with her scouring pots and arguing with bread and walking into the killing cold without flinching, because she'd worked out it couldn't have her. And because I was who I was, because 11 years of being the death of everyone I loved had taught me exactly one lesson, I said nothing. I let her warm my house and hold my hands through the midnight, and I told myself that wanting more than that was the surest way to lose it. A man who lets no one too near cannot be the death of anyone. It had been my whole religion for 11 years. I did not know yet that she was going to burn it down. The steward came in the 3rd week, old Maddox, the one man who had never fully left me, who lived down in the gatehouse and brought supplies to the door and did not come inside after dark. He came in daylight, and he stood in the thawed corner of my kitchen and watched Tamsin move about it like a woman in her own home, and then he drew me aside with his hand shaking on my arm. "Sire," he said, "do you know what she is? Do you understand what's sitting at your hearth?" "A healer from Larkfin," I said, though my heart had already begun to answer differently. A healer from Larkfin doesn't walk through the midnight cold and warm it, Maddox said. In 11 years I've carried out the bodies of men that cold has killed, and I've seen brave ones and strong ones and holy ones all fail. It doesn't fail. It's never once failed. And it's failing at her, sire, every night. It can't touch her. His old eyes filled. There's only one thing in the tales the frost curse can't take, Doran. Your father told you the tale himself when you were a pup. The one warmth a cold like that can't eat. You know what she is. Say it, I made myself demand, because I could not. She's your fated mate, Maddox said. The moon sent her the long way round, given away, overlooked, sent here as a thing they could spare, but she's yours, sire, she's your true mate, and she's the answer to the whole 11 years. Warmth the curse can't kill. That's not a healer. That's the cure the witch left a door open for and never thought a boy alpha would find. You have to tell her. You have to claim her before the moon that sent her. It's the only thing that breaks a curse like this. The bond made whole, the mate cherished, the cold finally answered with the one warmth it cannot eat. I sent Maddox back to his gatehouse, and I stood in my thawing kitchen and watched the woman the moon had sent me the long way round, and I did not tell her. Because Maddox was right about what she was, and he was right about what would break the curse, and I could not do it. To claim her, to make the bond whole, to bind her to me before the moon, it would tie her life to Dunkero, to me, to the cold I still could not be sure was truly beaten. What if it broke free of her warmth one night? What if I bound her to me, and the frost found a way, and I made her my mate only to make her my next dead thing? 11 years had taught me that everyone I loved, I lost, and that the only way to keep her safe was to keep the door in my heart shut even now, even with her warmth blazing on the other side of it. So I kept it shut, and she felt it. Of course she felt it. She was warm and I was learning to be, and there was a thing standing open in the air between us every midnight when she took my hands, and I kept refusing to walk through it, and she was not a fool. You've gone somewhere, she said one night, kneeling by my chair with my hands in hers, the cold banked around us. These last days, you hold my hands and you're 100 miles off. Have I outstayed my use? Tell me plainly, Doran. I'd rather be sent than watched from a distance. I've had enough of my life of being in a house where I'm not quite let in. And there it was, the exact shape of her old wound, and I was pressing on it. I, who would have died before I hurt her, was hurting her in the one place she'd already been hurt raw, and all in the name of keeping her safe. You have not outstayed anything, I said low. Tamsin, it is the opposite. It is that I and the door in my heart shuddered on its hinge, and I could not, because behind it was the whole graveyard of everyone I'd loved. It is that I dare not want what I want, because everything I want the cold takes. I have watched it take everything, and if I let myself, if I claim what my whole blood is telling me to claim, and then one night it finds a way past you, my voice broke. I would rather be cold forever than warm you into your grave, Tamsin of Larkfin. Do you understand? I am not holding you at a distance. I am holding a door shut against a thing that has killed everyone who ever stood where you are standing. She was quiet for a long moment. The fire she'd lit moved on the walls, and then she took one of her warm hands from mine and laid it against my jaw, exactly as she had that first hour, and she said, "You great grieving fool, you've had it backwards for 11 years. Her thumb moved on my cheek. You think the way to keep from being the death of people is to let no one near. But look at what that's cost, 11 years of a dead house, and every soul who might have loved you sent down the road, and the curse fed the whole time on your loneliness because that's what the witch built it to eat. She didn't curse you to be cold, Doran. She cursed you to be alone. Let no soul stay by you. The cold is just how she enforces it. Her eyes were fierce now, fierce and wet. And I stayed anyway. The one thing the curse was built to prevent, I did it in my first hour. So don't you dare tell me the way to save me is to send me off. The way you save me, the way we both get saved, is you finally stop being alone." I looked at her, and I understood that she was braver than my brother and stronger than my father, and that the moon had not sent me a healer. It had sent me the one soul in the world stubborn enough to walk into a curse built to keep everyone out. And still, Gods forgive me, still I did not claim her that night. The door in my heart shuddered but held. 11 years is a long time to learn a lie, and I had learned mine to the bone. I said, let me be sure. Let me be sure the cold cannot reach you. And then, Tamsin, then I will lay the whole of it at your feet, everything I want, I swear it on my father's grave. But let me be sure you are safe first. I have buried too many. Let me be sure. And she looked at me a long time, and I think she saw that this was not a rejection but the deepest fear of a man who had lost everything, and she was merciful, she was always merciful. All right, she said softly. Be sure, but be quick about it, Doran. I've spent my whole life waiting in doorways to be let in. I won't wait in this one forever. And she put her head against my knee and she stayed the night, as she stayed every night, warm against the frozen dark. I was not quick enough. The moon does not wait on a coward's timing. And 3 nights later the curse, which had spent 11 years learning to feed on my loneliness, rose to break me one last time. And it rose knowing that if it could not have my solitude any longer, it would settle for my grief. The worst night came in the dark of the year, on the longest night, when the moon rides highest, and a curse laid by moonlight has the most of itself to draw on. I felt it wrong from the dusk. Every night for 11 years the cold had risen the same way, slow, tidal, climbing to its killing height at midnight and sinking after. But that dusk it did not climb slowly. It surged. It came up out of my blood like a dam breaking, faster and colder and hungrier than I had ever felt it, and I knew before the light was fully gone that this was the night it meant to make an end. Whether of me or of the thing it had been built to prevent, I could not tell. Perhaps both. Tamsin, I said, and my voice was already frosting, already failing. Not tonight, tonight you have to go. Down to Maddox in the gatehouse, past the walls, out of the cold's reach. Tonight the frost was climbing my throat, tonight it's different, it's stronger, I can feel it. It means to finish this and I will not have it finish you. She had gone to the door, I thought for one plunging moment that she was leaving, and even as it broke my heart I was glad, but she was only throwing the bolt, locking us in. She turned back to me with her jaw set. No, she said. Tamsin. No. She came toward me across a floor already gray with rolling frost, and this time the cold did not bank so easily before her. This time it fought her, it crowded close and grudging, and I saw her flinch at it for the first time and keep coming anyway. You said let me be sure she's safe. Well, here's your surety, Doran, I'm not safe. I'll never be safe as long as this thing lives and you keep the door shut against the one thing that ends it. Sending me to the gatehouse doesn't make me safe. It just means we both die cold and alone in separate rooms, which is exactly what that witch wanted. She reached me. She took my frozen hands and the frost hissed around her grip and she held on. The tale is true. Maddox told you and you know it's true. Warmth the curse can't eat. The bond made whole. That's the cure, and you've been sitting on it for weeks because you're too frightened of losing me to keep me. So I'll say it since you won't. I'll say it into the worst night of your life. The cold was screaming now. It had never done that before. It rose around us in a howling gray column, and the fire she'd lit died, and the window glass cracked from corner to corner, and the frost climbed the walls in feathers, and I felt my own heart stuttering toward stopping. And in the middle of it, she put both her warm hands to my frozen face and made me look at her. I love you, Tamsin of Larkfin said into the killing dark. I have loved you since you stood in your dead hall and tried to save my life by frightening me home, because only a good man saves the person he's afraid of. I was given away my whole life and I have never once belonged to anyone, and I choose to belong to you here tonight in the worst of it. Not because you're a king. Because you're the warmest man I ever found under the most cold. So claim me, you stubborn wolf. Make the bond whole, stop being alone, answer it. And the door in my heart, the door I had held shut for 11 years against the whole graveyard of my dead, the door blew open. I stopped being sure she was safe. I stopped trying to save her by keeping her at arm's length. I did the one thing 11 years had taught me never to do. I let someone all the way in, into the cold, into the grief, into the ruin, and I took her face in my frozen hands, and I claimed her before the moon that had sent her the long way round. Then be mine, I said, and it was a vow and a prayer and 11 years of held breath all at once. Tamsin, my mate, my warmth, my Luna, mine, and I am yours, and I will never again send away the thing I love in the name of keeping it. Stay, belong, you are let in. The door is open, come all the way in. And I bound the bond whole. I do not know how to tell you what it is to feel a mate bond wake after 11 years of frozen silence. It was warmth, but that word is too small. It was warmth the way sunrise is a candle. It came up through me from the soles of my feet, from the place her hands had first banked the cold weeks ago, and it did not bank the frost this time. It answered it. The howling gray column of the curse met the whole living heat of the bond made whole, met the one warmth it had been built to prevent me ever finding, and it could not eat it. It had never been able to eat it, and now it could not flee it either, because I had finally stopped holding the door shut and let the warmth pour through the whole of me at once. The cold broke, not banked broke. I felt it crack down its length like river ice in the thaw, felt 11 years of frost come apart in a single roaring instant, felt the witch's whole gray working shatter against the simple, impossible fact of a man who was no longer alone. The howling stopped. The frost on the walls ran to water and streamed down the stone. The cracked window glass warmed and steamed. And the cold behind my ribs, the hand of ice that had closed on my heart when I was 23 and never once let go in 11 years. The cold behind my ribs opened its fist and left me, and I was warm, gods, I was warm, all the way through, warm the way I had been as a boy before I ever knew what I could lose. I came back to myself on my knees on the wet stone floor with Tamsin in my arms, both of us soaked and shaking and laughing. Yes, laughing. The two of us who had been given away by the world laughing on the floor of a hall that was no longer dead. The moon shone in clean through the steaming glass. Somewhere below us in the gatehouse, I heard old Maddox shout, a cracked old voice raised in something that was not grief for the first time in a decade. And in my arms my mate, my Luna, my warmth, put her hand against my jaw the way she had in the first hour, and this time the frost did not creep because there was no frost. There was only a man's warm skin under a woman's warm hand, and she said, wondering, "You're warm, Doran. You're warm all through." "Because you stayed," I said into her hair, "because you would not be sent, because the one thing it was built to prevent you did in your first hour and never stopped doing." I held her the way a drowning man holds the shore. 11 years I thought the way to keep from being the death of everyone I loved was to let no one near, and you walked in anyway and taught me the truth of it. The cure was never being alone. It was you. It was always going to be you. Larkfin sent riders in the spring, when word had climbed the pass that the cold king of Dunkero was cold no longer, that the frost-cursed hold had thawed, that fires burned in it again, that the feared Alpha King had taken a Luna. They had not expected, I think, to find their own discarded healer at his side. They had sent Tamsin as the one they could spare, the one they wouldn't miss, given away to a cursed man to die quietly and trouble no one. And they came up the thawed road to find her seated warm at the high table of a living hall, my mark bright on her hand, my whole restored pack. For they had come home the moment the cold broke, the wolves streaming back to Dunkero's warm gates from the wilds they'd been sent to years before, the whole pack ranged behind her, and old Maddox weeping at her right hand, and me at her left, no longer the cold king, but only a warm man who could not stop looking at his wife. The riders from Larkfin dismounted, and did not know where to put their eyes. Their headman began some speech about the honor of their hold and the healer they had so generously provided, and Tamsin let him get halfway through it before she rose from the high table and quieted him with one lifted hand. "You didn't provide me," she said, and her voice was gentle, which made it land the harder. "You gave me away. You looked round the room for who you could lose, and you decided it was me, and you sent me up a cursed road to fail and freeze and not be missed. I know exactly what I was to you. She let that sit in the warm hall until the headman's face had gone red as winter apples. I don't say it to shame you. I say it because I want you to carry the truth of it home. The one you could spare was the one the moon had been keeping for a king. The plain healer with no place at your table breaks the curse that killed his father's line. So the next time you look round a room for who you can lose, her voice went soft as falling snow, remember Dunkero. Remember that the person a hold thinks it can do without is very often the one who's been sent to the place that matters. And be gentler with them. That's all. That's the whole of my judgment. Go home and be gentler with the ones you'd give away. They went home. I am told Larkfin is a kinder hold now, that they have grown careful of their overlooked ones, and I like to think it's true, and I like to think it's her doing, my Luna's, the girl they threw away teaching a whole hold the worth of the ones no one wants. It would be like her. She did not become my Luna the way the tales end, with a crown and a throng and a coronation stamped like a seal. She became my Luna the way she'd become everything else in my house, quietly, warmly, by staying. There was a naming before the pack under the first true moon of the thaw, yes, and the wolves ringed her and lowered their heads to the warmth that had brought them home, and it was beautiful, and it was not the thing I keep. The thing I keep is smaller and it is mine. Every winter, on the longest night, the night the cold once rose to make an end of me, we do not light the great hearths of Dunkero. We let them go dark on purpose, that one night. And Tamsin and I sit together in the cold solar where she first knelt by my chair, in the dark, with no fire, and we hold hands the way we held them that first midnight, her warmth in my warmth, and we sit through the deepest hour of the deepest night with the frost held off by nothing in the world but the two of us being together. Not alone. Never again alone. And when the dark thins toward dawn, and the longest night turns over at last toward the light, I lift my wife's hand, and I press my mouth to the warm palm that thawed me, and I make her the only vow I have ever needed to make her twice. You stayed, I tell her every year in the dark, the one warmth the cold could never eat. You walked into the worst of me and you would not be sent, and you thought a house that had been dead 11 years and you belong here all the way in forever. I will never again send away the thing I love to keep it. I learned. You taught me. Stay. And every year my Luna, my warmth, the girl a whole hold thought it could spare, puts her free hand against my jaw in the dark the way she did in the first hour, and I feel a warm woman's hand on warm skin with no frost between us at all. And she says the same 3 words back to me that broke the curse, that ended the cold, that let a frozen man come all the way in from 11 years of winter. Always, she says, I stay. And the dawn comes up warm on the living walls of Dunkero, and we are neither of us alone.